I'm still unsure as to the extent to which I want to discuss politics on this channel. It can be divisive, and it seems like the modern political climate dictates that what you are has to decide who you are. A supposition that I reject outright, of course, but I will start off this video by saying this. Both fans and opponents of the person I'm about to discuss will probably find something to dislike in this video. To some, the mere fact that I've chosen to subscribe to this man will be contentious, regardless of my reasons for doing so. To others, the fact that I disagree with him on so many of his points will incite their ire. To both of these people I say, yeah, that's kind of the point, because it's important to hear dissent. I recently subscribed to Carl Benjamin, aka Sargon of Akkad. Why, someone who knows me well might ask? Well, hear me out. Despite my criticisms of social justice warriors in my own circles, I self-identify as a feminist, because I do not see these things as mutually exclusive. I am also a moderate leftist, who has shared no small amount of disdain for UKIP, a party that Sargon recently associated himself with. Often, I think Sargon goes off the deep end when it comes to his reactionary political videos. Though I do get that these types of videos trend well among his fanbase. If that's his hustle, then I really can't fault him for that. Ya boy needs rent money. At least he backs it up by making appearances at public events. I was also a vocal opponent of Gamergate for a short while. Though this was mostly due to the fact that I felt Gamergate focused too heavily on isolated incidents like Zoe Quinn, and not enough on scumbag practices which plague gaming journalism as a whole, such as paid reviews and developers refusing to release review copies of video games. Though I'm not sure Gamergaters would tell you otherwise. I digress. Considering all this, you might now be asking yourself why the hell a bleeding heart lefty like me would ever want to subscribe to Sargon of Akkad. Well, it's quite simple, really. I find it refreshing and enlightening to sit down on a slow day and listen to a few Sargon videos. Until recently, I would just bring up his channel whenever I wanted to listen to him. I don't agree with this guy, I'd rationalize to myself. There's no reason for me to entertain the notion of subscribing to him. However, as time has pressed on, I realized that quite the opposite is actually true. The first video of Sargon's I ever listened to was a series of deconstructions he did on Steve Shives. We will get to my Steve Shives experience in a later video, but suffice to say it was around the time of the whole MythCon incident. Carl was invited in some capacity to MythCon. I don't remember exactly what capacity they chose to bring on Carl. A cursory review of his old videos suggests that it was simply for a speech and a debate. Regardless, that's not exactly the point. Around this time, I wanted to see what the fuss was about. Prior to this, I only ever knew the Sargon of Akkad name as that guy who Coughlan and Shives hate, who's a bit of an ableist, and definitely an abrasive prick. I would say that I was immediately taken aback by how calm and collected Sargon actually is in most of his videos. Okay, I remember recalling to myself, what exactly is the deal here? Clearly this guy's got some opinions I'm not fond of, but he does self-identify as a liberal like myself, and he doesn't seem to be frothing at the mouth with anti-Semitism. So I set his videos to autoplay, and immediately started dodging lightning bolts in Final Fantasy X. After all, I needed some background noise to focus on or else I'd go crazy. Anyone who's ever tried to get Lulu's ultimate weapon in the game will attest to that. So I played the game and listened. And yeah, I disagreed with Sargon on a lot of stuff. I still do. But one of the reasons that I came back to subscribe, and keep coming back, is that despite all that I disagree with Sargon about, he is an open advocate of free speech. Sargon seems like the kind of person a man like me could debate in good faith. Well, perhaps not exactly like me. I'm not exactly good at remembering talking points. I'm reading off of a script right now, after all. And I think debates are rather useless since they incentivize quick and readily available witticisms instead of carefully considered responses. In contrast to this, especially in reflection to how I was being treated by the social justice community at the time, yeah, there's a big contrast. The local furry community into which I was trying to embed myself at the time had rejected me simply for refusing to condemn furry comedian To the Ranting Griffin. I had recently unsubbed from Steve Shives, not because I dislike him as a person, or dislike his points, most of the time, but because I was tired of listening to him complain about MythCon all the time. I'd also fallen out of his fan base on Facebook because followers of his were accusing me of all manner of indignity under the sun. I am still on his friends list, as I recall, but I no longer see his content. Somehow never managed to get blocked by Steve himself, though, and he was at least aware of my dissenting comments because he did reply, like, angry, whatever emoji you want to attach to a post on Facebook. Again, the subject of another video. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Sargon of Akkad. His opinions on some things aren't exactly woke, but he's hardly a Nazi. And listening to his channel has caused me to question some of the things that I believe. Because everyone should question the things that they believe. Since I started listening to Sargon of Akkad, I'm actually more resolute in some of the opinions that I disagree with him on. For example, I think Sargon needs to get his head out of his ass when it comes to Islam, because he doesn't actually understand what Muslims are about. I'm sure he might understand Islam on a very technical level, teachings, certain cultural practices practiced in certain parts of the world. But I went to school with Saudi people in Michigan. I taught Somali kids where I live now. Most of the latter were first and second generation immigrants. I know Muslims better than Sargon of Akkad does. They're people living their lives. Some of them are cool, some of them are little shitheads. The only difference between the preppy white girl and the bratty Somali girl is an accent. You'll get a bad attitude from either one. But the fact that I know that Sargon is wrong about this doesn't stop me from enjoying his channel, because I can sit down and identify every last thing that I think he's wrong about. And it doesn't stop me from finding him entertaining. But perhaps this video has been a little bit too focused on Sargon. He just happens to be the reason I initially decided to cover this topic, after all. It shouldn't be exclusively about Sargon. This video is about Dissent in general. So, let's use another good example from a smaller YouTuber whose political opinions I don't exactly align with. JDs and gentlemen, boys and girls, I give you Bonbon, aka Bonbon in the Suit. A self-identified centrist, Bonbon occasionally espouses things which are, well, nonsense.
Nazi beliefs are considered, at least nowadays, cruel and absolutely scummy to say the least. We disregard these ideals entirely because we believe as a society that we can all exist even with our differences. So we ignore the current day actual neo-Nazis who spout this nonsense until eventually the idea became so unpopular it sizzles out and dies. At least that's what it should have been. But this is 2018 we're living in, folks, and Nazism and right-wing extremism are actually becoming the more rational party over time simply because the word Nazi has been thrown around like it's just a backhanded insult.
I'll give her the benefit of the doubt that what she means there is SJWs like to call everyone to the right of Che fucking Guevara a Nazi, and so people are gravitating towards people who are now being labeled as Nazis, even if they aren't. I do actually give her enough credit not to think actual neo-Nazis are reasonable people. At any rate, the video that clip was pulled from is called Can We Be Civil to Those Who Disagree? There, she demonstrates some excellent examples of regressive leftist intolerance, and frankly, it's quite an amusing video. Link in the description below. Bonbon is indicative of someone who has been polarized by the regressive left. As a centrist, she's actually pretty reasonable when it comes to both sides of the political spectrum. She acknowledges that we both have demands and chooses not to ally herself with anyone based on party line. Oh, man. If you thought that SJW elements of the left were harsh on Republicans, you should see how they treat centrists. I haven't heard this many accusations of fence-sitting or being complicit since I stopped identifying as an agnostic and a communist, respectively. Honestly, it's kind of admirable how she goes about things, even if it means that I sometimes have to give her shit. Like for accidentally implying Nazis are reasonable people. Seriously, Bon, what the fuck was that? On to another topic. When it comes to political YouTubers, you wouldn't find many people that I enjoy more than Richard the Dick Coughlan. He's funny, abrasive, witty, and sometimes kind of a wreck. Oh, and he hates Sargon and pretty much all centrists with a fucking passion. And he really doesn't like it when you question his assumptions about things. One of the reasons I like Coughlan so much, though, is not just because the guy's funny as fuck. It's because he also tends to bring out the absolute worst in anyone who chooses to confront him. He tends to make people act like exemplars of the absolute worst facets of their own political ideologies. He carved out his niche on the internet, absolutely demolishing EDL, BMP, and UKIP supporters. He has gone on to expand this assault to many other ideologies that he doesn't agree with. If I had to exemplify Coughlan, it would be as he who snowflakes the snowflaked.
Let me explain.
I think Coughlan is way too hard on dissonant voices. That much should be apparent by the rest of this video. But I absolutely adore the guy's channel. When I say that he is he who snowflakes the snowflaked, what I mean is that there are a certain subset of people on the internet who like to claim that anyone who makes any amount of outcry, justified or otherwise, is a snowflake. Such people exist around the political spectrum, and Coughlan has the tendency to reduce these people to frothing, angry shells of composed individuals. He makes them feel targeted. It's not exactly the best approach to civil discourse, mind you. I don't think it actually works in terms of fixing anything. But god damn if it isn't entertaining. If nothing else, it's definitely vindicating. Richard Coughlan is another example of a channel whose opinions I do not always agree with. Granted, I tend to agree more often than with Sargon or Bonbon, but I've also listened to some of the polarizing opinions that he's had about centrists and right-wingers. It was something to consider, and even if he would never agree with the position that I've reached, I actively considered his stance when making the creation of my own. I feel as though I've been rambling, so I'll bring this to a point. I am subscribed to Sargon of Akkad despite the many contentions that I have with his points. In short, I disagree with him. I also disagree with The Amazing Atheist, Steve Shives, Dick Coughlan, To the Ranting Griffin, Bonbon, and so many other YouTubers. I disagree with them on points unique to each because of complexities I don't have the fortitude to bother covering in this already politically charged video. I enjoy their channels to varying degrees. Some, like TJ and Steve, I've unsubbed to over the years because I lost interest in their channels entirely. Others I still subscribe to and enjoy to this day. And yet, I disagree. Why is this? Ladies and gentlemen, you will find endless scores of people who disagree with you. We on the left are often guilty of creating isolated little echo chambers for ourselves where we never have to self-reflect and we can hurl our outraged condemnations at everyone who doesn't meet our exact standards. But no one will ever meet our standards. This attitude is like the bird of Hermes from the Ripley scroll. We're eating our own wings just to keep ourselves tame. I would love to tell you this is primarily a fault of the social justice community, but it isn't. It's modern culture as a whole. We just don't understand subtlety or disagreement anymore. We don't think we have to. But it is imperative for our culture to value the individual exchange of ideas. We need dissent to define us, because it's become plain to me that without opposing voices, we just end up bloviating amongst ourselves about how right we are and how bad everyone else is. You might not like it when I say this, but anti-feminists like Sargon taking a critical eye to everything we're about is actually good for feminism. The same is true of feminists who criticize MRA talking points. In theory, it keeps us honest. In practice, it doesn't always work like that, but the dialogue should exist. And when Sargon takes issue with something that he isn't actually right about, we refute him. Nothing more, nothing less. Not call him a Nazi, not call him a bigot. You might not like that approach, but hey, I guess that just means that I'm a dissenting voice. And that is just fine with me. Whether you dissent or withhold your intent, we are all just cogs in the machine.
Kill or be killed.